Hello everyone, welcome to Abnormal Investigation. I got an encounter for you, but first, I have some really good news. Coming up in January and February, I have some really amazing guests that have said they will come on the show. Some are some guests we've already had on the show, which were amazing, and we have some new guests coming on the show. So that's going to be really good. Also, don't forget we're going to be dropping a Patreon video only where we're going to dive into the things in the sky and the things underneath. That's going to be a really deep video. That's the reason it cannot be released on YouTube. But it's going to be released on Patreon. And again, we have set the Patreon at the very lowest tier we can so that everybody will have access to Patreon to be able to see that video drop. Plus, you'll have access to all the other photos and audio that is released on there. So there's some really good stuff there I think y'all really enjoy also. The link will be in the description of this video. Alright guys, let's get into this encounter. It was a crisp autumn morning in late October when I arrived at the lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. The sun just started to rise, casting a golden glow over the calm waters. I had been planning this fishing trip for weeks, and I was excited to spend a day on the lake hoping to catch some bass or even some catfish. I really like catfish, Mike. As I launched my boat and began to motor out to my favorite fishing spot, I noticed the forest surrounding the lake was eerily quiet. No birds were singing, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe the animals were just sleepy. It reminded me of some of your fishing trips, Mike. I love your catfishing videos on your other channel, Wide Open Adventures. By the way, I'm a subscriber to both. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I enjoy doing both channels. I reached my spot and began to cast my line, waiting for a bite. The morning wore on, and I caught a few small fish, but nothing worth keeping. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I decided to take a break and eat some lunch. I anchored my boat in a small cove and sat down to eat my sandwich. As I was eating, I heard a strange noise coming from the forest. At first, I thought it was just a deer or a wild boar, but then I heard it again. And then the famous low guttural grunt, followed by the sound of the branches snapping. My heart started racing as I realized that whatever was making that noise was moving through the forest, heading in my direction. I tried to tell myself it was just a stray animal, but the sounds were getting louder and closer, and they were not like anything I'd ever heard. It was like it was chattering with something, but in a deep voice, back and forth. One seemed to be a little further than the other one away, but they were still communicating nonetheless. Suddenly, a massive figure emerged from the trees. I'm just sitting here floating, quietly eating. It was covered in dark brown fur, and it stood at least 8 feet tall. Its eyes were fixed on me. As soon as it hit the clearing, it saw me, and I could sense a primal intelligence behind them. I was frozen in terror. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to move or speak or yell. I just stayed as calm as I could, trying not to provoke it and praying this thing could not swim. The creature, it took a step closer, its massive feet making barely a sound on the forest floor. I couldn't understand how this thing was so quiet, as large as it was. But I could feel its eyes. They were staring at me and sizing me up. And then it stepped into the water and walked about knee deep. It reached its hands down into the water and started to drink, never pulling its eyes away from me. For what felt like an eternity, the creature and I, we locked eyes. I was waiting for it to charge or attack and start swimming at me. I had my finger on the starter button, but it just stood there, regarding me with a curious expression, with water dripping from its mouth and fur. He looked like he was hot and thirsty, like he'd been traveling. Then suddenly, as he looked at me, another one came out. This one had breasts, but it was a little more afraid. He had to coach it up. He kept telling it like it was okay with his hands, telling it to come on. And finally it did. It came out. It did not come as far as he did toward me. It stayed a little behind him, and as it drank, he stood in front of it as if he was blocking it from me. They got their drinks, and as they were walking away, he turned and looked at me. And the look that he gave me was a look of intelligence like a human. He raised his hand, and like a wave, but it wasn't a wave. He held it up like an Indian would when they would first meet. And then he dropped his hand, allowing it to slap the top of his thigh, making a loud popping sound. He walked to the wood line, as she just disappeared into the woods as a deer does when they go into the grass. They blend in so good. He turned, looked at me, beat his chest, pointed to the sky for some reason, and then let out the longest, most scary, deep roar I've ever heard, and then walked into the woods. I have no idea what that meant, but I wasn't going to stick around and find out. I started the motor on my boat and I got out of there. I have not been back to that cove or that area. I don't know if he was passing through, if he was hunting, or what was going on, but I'm not willing to find out. But I will still never understand why he slapped his chest, pointed at the sky, and then slapped his thigh, and then roared at me. Was he telling me not to follow, or was he trying to give me a sign? I'm not sure. I hope somebody in the audience can give me a good idea of what happened, or at least what they think he was doing. This is still bothering me greatly. Thank you for sharing my story. I don't know why he would do that. I think the roar might have been to scare you. I don't know if it was meant to all be together or if he was just doing something, but it does sound like they were very thirsty that they came out in front of you and allowed you to see them drink. I think it's interesting how she was more shy than he was, but you could definitely tell in the story how you told it that he was her protector. So they are moving in groups, I would say, at least him and her. And there might have been more around. Maybe they were hunting. I'm not sure. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments what you all think was happening. And thanks for watching, guys. And don't forget, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And we'll see you on the next one.